Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Quasi online speaker series. I am Lavinia Lascaris, the exhibition and graphic designer at the Hoffmitz Milken Center for Typography.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Ximena Amaya. I'm the graphic designer here at the HMCT.
The series is centered around the exhibition Quasi Experimental Writing Systems, which Ximena and I curated and designed together with Simon Johnston. The exhibition, which is currently on view at the HMCT Gallery here in Pasadena, is about invented and fictional writing systems.
And as we've been saying, Quasi lives at the intersection of typography, linguistics, and fiction, showing writing systems that, unlike those that have evolved organically over generations of collective usage, were created at specific points in time with intention and purpose.
And we'll put the exhibition in the chat for everybody, for anybody who wants to have a closer look.
Yeah, this online speaker series was curated to add to the dialogue of Quasi, offering some more insight into what instigates language creation. And we have heard about language creation in science fiction, personal expression, language representation, and in this session, we will hear about writing with the natural world. The session will reflect on the capacity of language and design to extend beyond anthropocentric perspectives, incorporating natural points of view to the narrative.
Nice. There have been 4 sessions, and for this final session, we have invited Marianne Hoffmeister, Patricio Gonzalez, and Yuchen Chang to be our speakers, and today they will be sharing with us 2 projects which involved creating language using resources found in nature. And we'll let them introduce themselves properly. But just briefly, Marianne and Patricio, both from Chile, are part of the exhibition with their project Castor, which is a typeface created by tracing beaver marks, beaver teeth marks. Marianne is a multidisciplinary visual artist and an educator based in the United States. And Patricio is a type designer and a founding partner of W Type Foundry.
And Yuchen Chang is an interdisciplinary artist, and she's the creator of the Choral Dictionary, which interprets chorals, complex forms, and colors into a distinctive language, showcasing how natural patterns can inspire linguistic and design elements.
Before we get started, just a few maintenance points for the audience. If you have any questions during the presentations, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. Any other final thoughts before we get started?
Just thank you, Yuchen, Marianne, and Patricio for being part of the series. As we mentioned, this is the last series, so thank you for everyone that's been supporting it. And yeah, we'll be back at the end for the Q&A.
Perfect. So Marianne and Patricio, if you want to get started, we'll pass it on to you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your time with us with my practice. So for this presentation, I will start introducing the concept and thought process that resulted in the Castor typeface, which was both a commission and a collaboration between Patricio. And then Patricio will follow up with the technical aspects of the creation of the Castor typeface. So I would like to start by providing briefly some context about me and my practice. I am a visual artist and educator, and my work proposes a critical examination of the representation of non-human animals in contemporary visual culture. I work with different mediums such as film, installation, drawing, editorial practices, and artist book to propose non-anthropocentric storytelling strategies to imagine new modes of relation with non-human domains. So in a nutshell, I want my research to offer a space for reframing the ways we perceive, conceptualize, and talk about animals. So the Castor typeface actually emerged as part of one of my ongoing projects called Study of Beaverness, which proposes sort of a speculative beaver-centric imaginarium that connects human and beaver stories of entanglement. This is across hemispheres and territories. So this is between the US, where I'm based now, but mostly also Chile, where I come from, and where beavers live now as a non-local species in part of the territory. So one of the aims of this project is to produce a visual universe where roles shift or are reversed and present the beavers as the agents or even as the historical subjects, narrating their own stories. And I'm doing this by trying to craft a speculative iconographic world that is closer to the likeness of the animal, in this case, beaver or beaverness. So actually, the Castor typeface was emerging to the process of creating and thinking throughout this beaver-centric universe. However, actually, Castor was initially thought as an asset for the video animations that I'm currently producing, and some also booklets and multiple projects, because I wanted to have a more consistent, solid, also that a beaver world that had more depth. So that's why I was interested in creating this alternative beaver language or writing method. However, Castor ended up becoming an independent piece in itself. This is a piece with its own conceptual life. So Castor is no longer an asset. So it actually embodies many of the issues, concepts and conundrums that I try to metabolize through my work, and that I will develop through as I go through this presentation. So one of the most important pieces of this project, and also for Castor, is this piece of tree gnawed away by a beaver, a temporary dweller at the Frick Park in Pittsburgh, where I was also living back then, and also where I found it. And this piece has been, it's still my first magnitude and connection with beaver worlds, and of course the reference and blueprint for the Castor typeface. For me, this piece is a trace of beaverness. It is a register of a beaver's process while felling a tree, the possible angles used by it for a more successful carving. Maybe it embodies its hesitations, the sudden changes of mind of this beaver. The piece incorporates the marks of the teeth, but also it incorporates the movement of the beaver body. So for me, this piece is very irrelevant to me for this project, but also on an emotional level, as it encapsulates the way another being shapes and carves out its world. So for me, this piece is an artifact of beaver making or beaver world building. So, so through the process of conversation with collaborators, with Patricio and other artists, and also in spending time with this piece, I came to consider this piece as a portal or a speculative space of communication, a sort of Rosetta Stone or Rosetta log, pun intended, of that contains a beaver message, maybe the cues of a beaver writing system. Of course, in a space of absolute fiction, since it is known that the language of beavers relies strongly on other senses, such as the olfactory or the auditive. But I wanted to be work with this space of fiction and fabulation. In addition to these ideas, also this notion of note-taking and language or alphabet even emerged from other small exercises and installations that I did at the beginning of this project, a study of beaverness. And here for these small installations, I was presenting my first attempts to understand beaverness. So to say, my first fictional field research strategies to understand or to get to know beaver world making. So in the area where I found the wooden piece, I also found gathered other very important pieces. This is the vivid wood shavings, which are the residues and traces left by the beaver, residues of the wood and bark of the tree, left by the tree felling action of the beaver on the tree. So I started gathering these pieces as well to build an archive. And I thought what it was interesting to me that these are the leftovers of an imprint on another body. Or maybe they also represent the inflections caused by the different teeth pressure angles used by the beaver. Maybe the angles used by the beaver to carve, they're all different. Also, of course, depends on the thickness and the softness of the wood. But by gathering them and creating this kind of like archive or journal of this wood shavings, they start to resemble a sort of alphabet. And again, this is also where the idea of communication or hidden language start to emerge. These all came together with this piece, with this artist book called the Book of Nos, which I took my wood shaving archive and I drew the silhouette of each of those wood shavings in each of the pages of this book to create a journal of the actions of knowing, chomping, and carving, also as well as being a journal, a register of the beaver's impact on a given territory. For me, what is interesting, that the register of these pieces let us bear witness to an element that just seems a residue, but actually is the evidence of something broader, a world-making process, a meaning larger than the small pieces themselves. So just to lay this, this is for me the origin of Castor, and that's how I started thinking about that this could be a writing system, visual system, perhaps a typeface. So this was last year. So some things have shifted. At least my thought process has shifted a little bit, and that's how this piece has gained its own conceptual life. So to rush that into now. So during the process of creation of Castor, and of course in conversation with Patricio, I start to feel that thinking about this piece as a Rosetta Stone, or that there was a language or a writing system that to be deciphered, start to feel slightly rather anthropocentric to me and running counter to my own research. So for me, in this sense, now Castor has become a piece to think with, the ways we keep using human models of subjectivity to render animality, which is a conundrum in itself. And yes, we're humans, we cannot avoid being anthropocentric. But in further reflection about this piece, and what for me is very important, that for me, the creation of Castor now has more to do about how do we challenge or subtly alter those models of subjectivity, these anthropocentric models, and how do we co-opt them to shift our attention to non-human worlds. And for me, that is where the moment in which actually Castor stops being an asset and starts to have a conceptual life on its own, as an independent piece of this world-building project. And so question is then how that happens, how it alters those models. And for me, it has to do with a matter of attention. So, and something Patricio also will explain further, actually, of course, Castor is pure fabrication, it's fiction. There's no assigned meaning to any of the glyphs. Therefore, it helps us to be released for a moment from the weight of human signification. And it let us pay attention into other things, such as readability, texture, linearity, meaning. What is human meaning? What is non-human meaning? Modes of writing. So in this sense, for me, this typeface is a play tool, it's a conceptual play tool. And as a visual system, is a testimony to one of the ways another being shaped its surrounding world. So for this reason, this typeface, Castor is always in a state of flux. It remains unknowable. There's no single way to use it, to write with it. In context, it might look like a teeth mark. In some other in other ways of displaying it, it might look like a map of bodies of water, fur patterns, a flock on a distant horizon. So it has shape-shifting identities. So this piece, in the sense, is giving us a space and freedom to play. And for me, what is important, to wander through the joy of not knowing. So Castor is a system, a space of shape-shifted identities, mostly as if of knowledge that we can really never access, although it is rooted in something material, beaver teeth mark. But we can imagine with it and perhaps feeling closer to this fictional space of beaver world maker or beaver writing, which puts our attention into other ways of being in the world, an attention to other registers that shaped and bear witness to this world. So what's interesting is that how to utilize, write, or read the system remains in this unending process of elucidation. And this also emerged in conversation with Patricio. All the things that in terms of the discipline of typography, Castor also brings to the foreground some questions of legibility, linearity of text, signification. So it also, in that sense, the discipline, it becomes also a space for play. So also part of the project has been in the creation of small publications that actually work on the idea of this impossibility to read, or find ways to explore this and display with Castor how to write if it has meaning, or the new permutations, iterations that come from playing with Castor. So this turns Castor into a typography for play rather than interpretation and writing. So I do hope that in this process, it allows us to be, so to say, nearness to more than human world making, beaver making, maybe earthwork poetry, or at least it beckons a playground for feeling and thinking about beaverness, non-human worlds, without it being absolutely available to us. Or at least a tool whose legibility is always this unending process of resolution, or will be always on murky waters. So in terms of time, because I need to wrap up, the continuation of this project actually will be the creation of the continuation of another Castor typeset, in this time based on teeth mark of another beavers. This is a piece of a lenga tree from Argentina, Patagonia, and we will try to also establish a typeset based on this teeth mark of this particular beavers, Fuegan beavers. This is maybe to connect and create a speculative, impossible dialogue across hemispheres, ancestries, territories, and modalities of being. In connection to my research, a study of beaverness. So interest of time, I'll stop here and I'll let Patricio continue with his take on Castor. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Patricio Gonzalez, type designer for Chile. I'm freaking out because this is my first time speaking in English, and so I try to do my best. And thanks for inviting us to talk about this project. And my participation in this project started with Marianne's invitation to work together, tries to answer the question, what is beaver school rights? This was the first question. So the first idea that came to me was to define the framework within which we will work. Because writing is a very complex activity, as everyone here knows. It's involved a mix of different techniques. So the project starts with this question: what if the beaver could write? And the first idea was define the framework because writing is a very complex activity, and that's involved a mix of different techniques, tools, meanings, forms, and so on. But our starting point was accept the idea that the beaver can write. And Marianne found this piece of wood that was our Rosetta Stone, like she said. And the brief was to create a typeface that could be that technology, capable to creating something very similar to this stone. And when Marianne sent me some picture of the loss, my approach to this was to understand the marks that the beavers made on this piece of wood. And I drew a line in every teeth mark, and here are the draft of this action. I did this in all of the side of the woods of the pot, and my objective was trying to find some logic in this, and I found some logic. I choose small units. I choose units thinking that this could be our letters, and these were programmed like a typeface. This was the process. I choose a small unit and assign to every click. But the problem is that if you design a typeface, even using a weird form, if you try to understand the form, you will able to understand the form. It's just time and practice. And this is because the form are equivalent. So this was a problem to our project because we wanted to create something more complex and illegible. And the solution for this was to use more forms, more shapes. Here you can see the Glyph app, which is the app that I use to design typefaces, and you can see 4 colors. They are 4 sets from the A to C with different tick marks. So we have 4 shapes for the same letter, and this is an example for this. This is an A with four shapes, and every set was named by their cycle. Cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, and 4. Here you can see all the cycles, and the objective for doing this is to create a complex typeface. I used this code that Patricio Gonzalez, another Chilean type designer, told me to create, and it's make the shapes change constantly like a loop between their cycles. You can see this is the theater that this typeface has. This is the loop. This was the solution for the first problem, that the problem of the equivalence between the form. You have the hello word, and in the first use, you can see the typeface without the hello, but in the second one, you can see the loop active. The filter it's activated. And here are some examples. You can see how there's some aspect of our writing system disappears. Firstly, the capacity of understand and the different use of the shapes and the spaces. That is a very important in our system because it's the spirit of the writing and reading system. And I made a video. This is a video that explains how works the typeface. And I think that it's more important than the result of the use of the using of this typeface. It's the process, because it's like a game that you need to discover how to use it. Every time that you use this typeface is a new use. So this is all. Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia and Marianne. That was great. It's great to hear from your project. Like we've been seeing so much of it, but it's great to hear from you personally. Okay, any questions for Patricia and Marianne? We'll answer at the end. And Yuchen, the screen is all yours.
Yes. Can you see my hands? Okay.
Yes, we see it.
Okay. Well, my name is Yuchen, and I don't have a self-introduction prepared, but I think we will get to know each other throughout this conversation. And I just want to say that I'm still immersed in the joy of learning about beaver and this beaver-centric word. And now this is another word from another perspective. It was through a combination of many factors in September 2019 I had a chance to spend a month on this small island in Malaysia, Pulau Dinawan. How small is the island? It takes about an hour to walk around and 20 minutes to walk across. And because of how small it was, I could see water whichever direction I turned. This is Muka, derived from face, it means surface. Laut is ocean. Ocean is horizontal and have many currents and are very big. And Alun is wave. So in Malay, making a noun twice makes it plural. Alun is one wave, alun, multiple waves. I draw a shadow to mimic the sonic repetition. This is morning. Morning is the upper half of the day, the AM. And this is a day. A day is a unit, a completion, and a cycle. The surface of the sea waves in the beginning of a day. A friend I made on the island asked if I want to see sunset from the other side of the island. We walked across a dense layer of trees, vines, and tall grass. And we passed by some half-torn walls. And on the other side of the island, bathed in the insanely neon-looking orange ray, I realized that beneath us, we were standing on a beach covered by corals, but different from those that I saw earlier underwater. These corals had been bleached by the sun, dehydrated by the wind, and fragmented by tide. I couldn't help but bending down and picked up one and two and more. And I uncontrollably started arranging them into categories. And I spent the next day appreciating my harvest by drawing them. I wonder if it's what's called calcification. The surface of the coral responds to light in a contained manner. And perhaps it is a physical transformation that happened so slowly, left the corals a hint of period of time, both before and after this moment, not unlike forever. I started to collect coral bodies every day and everywhere. As it turned out, the island I stayed on was a reef. The act of bending down and picking up reminded me of the gleaners and the gleaners. And I lay out my harvest in front of my living space, and I started arranging them into growing collections. I also learned that Aristotle once think corals were minerals. Later, he changed his mind and described corals as deep sea trees. And the Babylonian Talmud refers to coral among list of type of plants. The Persian polymath Al-Biruni classified coral as animals, arguing that it responded to touch. Nevertheless, people believed coral to be plants until the 18th century, until William Herschel used a microscope to establish that coral had a characteristic stem cell membrane of an animal. This is third person pronoun, so it's a singular standing shape, represents a subject. If I turn this pronoun horizontally, at the bottom it means me, because the bottom is closer to the one who's reading and writing. On top it's you, so they're interchangeable, depends on who's speaking. This is capable. It's flexing muscles. This is a verb that means both to smell and to kiss. So it could be lips or a nostril carefully conjured up. and here is a gentle inhale. This is fragrance. Fragrance is intangible yet expansive, can be carried with wind. This is flower with 5 petals. In Malay, the word for flower is also interest. Both interest and flowers are bonus of the word. There was a boat shuffling in between Pulau Dinawa and the city Kota Kinabalu. One day I boarded the boat with a shopping list, including a SIM card, instant coffee, and pencils. Many stops need to be made. I hopped from taxi to taxi. And shockingly, I observed every taxi driver we encountered was listening to a radio station of a different language. English, Malay, Cantonese, Hokkien, among many others. After asking where I was from, a driver told me that he actually went to a Mandarin-speaking elementary school simply because it was close to home. But when his younger sister reached the age for school, their family had moved. His sister then went to an elementary school near the new home and was educated in Tamil, a Dravidian language. Neither of these 2 languages was what they speak at home, Bahasa Melayu, and neither of these 2 languages was what they used in this conversation he had with me, English. In a bookstore located on the top floor of a shopping mall, I stumbled upon a dictionary, Kamosari. The dictionary translating between Malay and Mandarin and English was first published in 1973. This is the 4th edition, republished in 2018. Similar to the 3rd-person pronoun, but with many protruding details, this is a plural pronoun, they or them. This is race. It's a community with a common root. This is connect or express, so it's very excited and performative. This is language. Language has a vast body and it's very unstable and it's bleeding throughout all contour. This is nationality. It is very stable and has a clear boundary. People of different race connect via national language. Edited and published by and for Chinese diasporas in Malay, the design of this dictionary has a very familiar aesthetics to me, but the sentences included here as examples were somewhat distinguished. They seem utterly vivid. Browsing quickly from page to page, my heart started pounding. While waiting for the returning boat at the port, which consisted of several plastic chairs facing the water outside of a seafood restaurant, I kept on reading. And I was able to capture one of the feelings I was experiencing. I know this life, although I had just arrived in this country for 2 weeks, the short stories encapsulated in each of these sentences spoke to me. And the tapestry of a collective memory they weave. For example, kita berangha di tempat yang mengganjing. We rest at a place that's windy. This is a scenario that has never happened to me in my past life experience. In those places I've lived, Northern China and Northern America, a windy place is never a restful place. But the heat on the island was so overwhelming, even sitting in stillness, drops of sweat would not stop falling. And only when there's a breeze, I can inhale and relax. Or Nelayan selalu menghuja-huja di laut. Fishermen often get caught by the rain at the sea. With foolish confidence and optimism, one day I went kayaking on a cloudy afternoon, and not long after it started to rain. Tiny dots and circles evenly and completely filled my visual landscape. Water in various forms enclosed me. I looked around with a little joy, a little fear, and enormous yet indescribable hollow feeling. But now I see it printed in a dictionary. That moment is no longer indescribable, isolated. I imagine all the people who have used this expression in the past and future, all the people who are caught by the rain while sitting at the center of the sea. I can imagine a community. This is the third person pronoun again, and this is to look for a way out, a walking body with a head down. Magic also means wisdom. This is a proposition, it redistributes energy. In order to, this is for that. Captivate, to be captivated is to be coiled by a snake. Heart, fiancé. Fiancé is a blurry figure with breasts. He looked for magic in order to capture his fiancé's heart. Ancient as oral language and spoken by 290 million people across maritime Southeast Asia, Bahasa Melayu never had its own script. It was spelled with Palava and Kawi, originated in South India, Rencong, originated in Sumatra, and Jawi, derived from Arabic alphabet during the Islamization of Malay archipelago. In 1904, British colonial administrator Richard James Wilkinson launched Wilkinson spelling with Roman letter, which became the official spelling system widely used in our British colony, in Malaya, Singapore, and Borneo. Ginawa Island belonged to the state Sabah, located in the north half of Borneo, and the south half of Borneo now belong to Indonesia. They both speak Malay, but the writing system has been divided into British fashion and Dutch fashion due to different colonial administrations. Malaysia declared a cultural agreement Malay declared independence in 1957, and 2 years later, the Federation of Malaya and Indonesia signed a cultural agreement to implement a common spelling system. The plan was delayed by diplomatic tension and military confrontation. Until 1972, the common spelling system, which came to be known as New Rumi spelling in Malaysia, was officially announced. The interior of Malay language. Malay has incorporated vocabularies of English, especially those that relates to economy, law, commerce, and politics. Sanskrit, especially those has to do with abstract concepts, as well as many Chinese dialects, including Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka, and the exterior of Malayu, culturally and religiously, as well as ethnically. The incredibly diverse Malay language showcases an intricate linguistic ecology where multiple literacies are simultaneously being activated. Wherever I see Malay, I most likely would also see English and Mandarin Chinese next to it. This is reflected in literature, school system, and basically all words in public. And everyone that I talk to in Kota Kinabalu operates 2 to 3 languages or dialects, some even more. The gaps in between incompatible vocabularies and syntax are rendered often seamlessly, with patient smiles, cooperative nodding, and shared living experiences. This is movie. It is a strip of film or the rectangular screen. This is picture. It also means to depict. This is frothy or twisted or unreal. And this is native people. Native people is life associated to a piece of land. This movie depicts a faulty image of the native people. One evening, Connie came by my window to chat with me. After hearing what I had been working on, Connie told me that during Japanese occupation, schools in Malaysia were only allowed to teach Japanese. I said the same thing happened in Northeast China, aka Manchuria. Connie said, if they succeeded, now we will be talking Japanese. I said, I think that was the plan. However, now we're talking English. What does that say about us now? Connie speaks English very well. Still, we both have moments when we fail to find the right word or put the words in right order. The efforts in those moments, communication doesn't stop. We accompany each other through the forest of unknown vocabulary and grammar. In fact, in the early 20th century, many progressive left-wing Chinese intellectuals, such as Lu Xun, Qian Xuantong, Xu Qiubai, wanted to Romanize Chinese language and abolishing Chinese characters altogether. For one, it's too complicated and thereby privileged. Two, it's not phonetic. Three, it's the decadent of feudal society, not compatible with new concepts, with Western science and technology. Fueled by the proletarian internationalism and a painful desire for modernity, Chinese characters were condemned as disease, as defective currency, as dead bodies, and people who hold on to them as 骸骨迷恋, corpse fetish. This movement did not succeed, although Chinese writing has been greatly simplified in mainland China and Pinyin, a romanization system, has been nationally implemented and heavily used, especially in the digital age. Chinese characters are far from being replaced. In 2020, central pandemic time, a protest bursted out in Inner Mongolia, and it was caused by a curriculum reform that was imposed on ethnic school by China's Inner Mongolia Department of Education, which replaced Mongolian with Standard Mandarin. This is a cut or injury. It's a fresh wound. And this is a verb, 挺高. It means both to leave and to stay. How can the word mean both to leave and to stay? This is how I understand it now. If this dictionary is here, it's simply here. But if I leave the room, the dictionary stays. So the verb staying only happens when there's the action of leaving. Leaving and staying are two sides of one event. This coral has a forward-moving momentum. It is leaving, but it is also anchored to stay. Scar, unlike injury, which is a negative shape, a cut, a scar is actually more. A scar is accumulation of tissues and organisms that mend and compensate. In Malay, the word for scar is the same with the word for talent. Both scar and talents are marks. For the last few days, I was on the island. The island entered its rainy season. Every afternoon, it pours for 40 minutes. accompanied by the sound of wild percussion. I combed through this dictionary and selected 182 sentences. I started translating them one by one in the past 5 years. And as of yesterday, I have had 75 of them. Thank you.
Beautiful, Yuchen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, great. Before we open it up to the audience for questions, do you have any questions for each other? Your projects have, the reason why we paired the two projects is because they have that common ground of, found elements in nature being used for creating language. So I'd like to start the conversation between the three of you.
Oh, maybe I can, more than a question, is a comment. Your work is just so beautiful. And I think what is interesting to me in terms of how maybe our work dialogue together is because in the sense that I think they're both on the different side of a spectrum in a good way, in the sense that you are you find meaning and connection through the shape of coral. And that has become an system in itself, which is very, yet very, again, it has direct meaning, yet it's still very open-ended, which for me, it is very, very interesting. However, for me, Castor actually, although also we have all the marks are real, are marks of a teeth, of a specific movement of teeth and mark on the surface. However, I try to keep the work unknowable in the sense that it's textures. Yes, at some point with what you're thinking that even the cycles, we can find some pattern happening that maybe can have meaning. But for me, in my own research, maybe what makes the work for me make sense is that it remains unknowable. And on your end, what I think is fascinating, and you do it very successfully, is that it's still unknowable, yet you have been able to solidify it and make it legitimize it. And again, and also through the dictionary that you are creating. So I don't know if it's a question, it's more like a comment to start a conversation. But I think for me, that is beautiful and interesting. And what is interesting to me is that when you were talking about the shapes and how you assign meaning to the shape, for me, that was fascinating. And when you start talking about, for example, art or language or the scar at the end, it made so much sense when you were talking about it. It made sense to me. I think I just wonder, without a context, what other meanings others could be projecting on it. Again, this is not a question itself, it's just to start a bit of conversation. But I think for me, that's interesting how the dialogue on a different spectrum, so to say, but both, again, rooting themselves into material world, in this case, literal. But so I think that was beautiful to me.
Thank you so much. I have much of the same sentiments when I was hearing both of your lecture, and I thought it was such a whimsical pairing. Because on the one hand, I have this feeling that I'm looking at myself, like I understand a lot of what you do, but on the other hand, there's so much differences, and this same and differences is kind of dazzling. There are things I recognize, and there are some nuanced tangents that will run differently. For example, what you are after are the marks made by beavers. What I'm after are the corals themselves. And the marks I'm making, I'm tracing them and solidify them in a way. And Patricio used this method of draw. We drew the contours of each mark, and I also draw, even though in a different method, yours more digital and I want to say scientific, while mine comes from a system. Sure, this is my father's drawing of Soviet Union revolutionary realism. I draw uncontrollably because of my training. But I think drawing, or this verb draw in at least English, may have a deep connection with language. For example, isn't saying something to draw attention to something? Isn't naming something to draw connection between the name and the thing itself? And I think this desire to draw or to pull with lines is a very centric or primal impulse embedded in the desire to make meaning or make language or make connection. I was also thinking of this book, Inclusive Aesthetics by Nicolas Bourrier. I happened to saw a lecture by him last year, and he has this rather wild theory. He believes that birds and a lot of fishes are so colorful, so beautiful. That's not for evolution. That's too extravagant for survival. It must be for self-expression. That a lot of biologists have agreed that animals have need for self-expression. At the same time, he also thinks that now we have enough scientific proof that inside of our body, there are all kinds of others. There are all kinds of microbiotic germs. And perhaps it is their need for self-expression make some of us artists. That's how the book ended. And I thought it was, I don't know, it's hard to prove it wrong. Maybe corals are using me to express themselves. I don't think I'm making meanings. I usually use the term translate. I do think they are meaningful and expressive already. That's why they drew me. That's why I was drawn to them. What I'm trying to do is to find the overlap of their meaning and the meaning that we are equipped with.
That's such a beautiful perspective.
Yeah. Actually, I think what's interesting, because I do an opposite. I think the opposite kind of operation. However, for me, what's interesting is that when we look again, beavers being such an important figure in culture and history, and I think there's an interesting parallel in the sense that beavers are with humans, one of the only beings that actually they do not adapt to their surroundings. They change it, they shape it, so they can live in it. They're ecosystem engineers. They build, and it's true, they're engineers. They have knowledge of bodies of water. And probably if human communities were looking at beavers to understand how bodies of water could be managed. So I think for me, it's interesting that also maybe the idea of thinking that there's a writing system, that beaver is also a culture, comes from understanding beavers also as engineers. So I think for me, it's interesting. However, I think on my other end of that, but again, this is particular to my own practice, because I try to find other ways to understand animality, thinking that animals has always been considered on Western modern science, always visible, knowable for us humans, biologically classified, you can say this, but they're always understood as a taxonomy, as an object, as a site of production, agricultural production, as symbolic production, etc. And mostly animals are an object, and that we assume that we can always make them novel to us, which is a sense of mastery upon the world. So for me, in my case, I do the other operation in which I made a system that actually is always a novel to us. That actually I start thinking of like, okay, but this is not a Rosetta log. There's no writing system. It's anthropocentric of me to think, although I like to be in that conundrum. I enjoy it, to be honest. But I think for me, that's where the work lives, that we create a system, it's writing, but actually we try to find meaning, but there's no meaning. It's always unknowable. And I like that it remains unknowable, although the marks represent something that is material in this world. It's a mark. It's actually a mark. It's a mark that embodies a world building of a beaver. But this is on my particular practice. However, in yours, although you are maybe saying that maybe the corals choose you to this message, the meanings you find are so open-ended and so porous, flowy, organic, that I feel that there's the anthropocentric feeling feels like it's dissolving. So I think for me, that is what is very beautiful about your work, that you find meaning, yet it's so flowy, organic, and still, even if you have this full dictionary, we can still project so much on it. It's open-ended, flexible. which is interesting because it's in contrast to a choral, which is so tough, rough, but yet language is flowy. So I think I like to have the kind of contrast of textures, conceptual textures, so to say. Sorry if I'm being ambiguous, but that's what's also interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I think there's a very crucial difference between our project is you're dealing with the living ones, I'm dealing with the deceased. And you're giving them subjectivity, you're respecting their opacity. Well, actually, I have met real corals underwater and I received the clear signal of hostility. I knew they don't want me there and I knew I shouldn't be there. They are very much endangered all over the world. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't victimize corals. Maybe I should also give them more subjectivity. But in my experience, I felt that I could not interact with them. That is not my place. Yet on the beach, confronted with this pile of corpse, that I felt somewhat, I felt a sense of kinship. It is as if when they lost their vitality, that I was allowed to project my own. I think you use the words projection as well. Yes, and I was also, there's so much I want to respond in what you just said, but I will pause here.
It's so interesting to hear both of your perspectives. We do have a question for Castor, so I will read that. Why would you do a Castor 2 font from the Castors of Patagonia? Do you think the results will be different? And will it be a different language because of the origin?
Actually, I think that question is the one that I'm also questioning with me and Patricio right now. Okay, this typeface, again, was part of a larger process that I'm developing, the study of beaverness, which is artistic project that again has video, text, a larger installation, which is connecting beaver stories or storylines, or even I will say beaver lore in the US and also in Chile. So I do have my magnitude busy here. And of course, I also want to study the magnitude there with the Fuegan beavers. Okay, so in a nutshell, because this is a long story, the beavers in Chile are also Castor canadensis, technically. However, they were brought in around 1946. That's a year where we were brought to Argentina and Chile. But at this point, there are Fuegan beavers. They're their own community there. So it will be nice to have this dialogue. Again, this is connected to my research, to have this dialogue through hemispheres, north, south, across territories or different ancestries and legacies of beaver action. That is going to be different. We don't know, and that's why we're trying to discover. We don't know if the marks are going to be, again, there are many factors that this is a different kind of tree. Interesting, it's a tree that actually, lenga, which are endangered by the action of the beaver, in contrast to this maple tree, the one I have here. We don't know also, in the case of the US, the beaver was a young beaver. We know it's a young beaver because in the free area, beavers they're not temporary residents. They're temporary residents, sorry, they don't stay. They go to the Monongahela River, and that's where they create their dams. So we don't know, and that's what is interesting about this project. My feeling is that it will be very similar. It will be very different to discern, but let's see how it goes. I'm interested. I don't know what you think about Patricio. If it's going to be similar or different.
I don't know, because I think that the technology of writing is controlled by the old system of I don't know, by tools, timing, rhythm. So maybe the lenga is the option that allow to do a different typeface. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's harder than the other trees, I don't know. And this could be the difference. But I was thinking about these two projects. We talk about like this is very new for us. Make a language of the nature, inspired by the nature. But I was thinking that is the spirit of the writing. Try to control the nature because the letter form, it was an evolve of the drawing of cow. I know the male cow. What's the name for the bull? Head of bull. So this is the historical evolution of the form of the shape. So we are trying to do the same, but maybe I don't know where this will finish. And this is interesting for me because we can talk and speak only the thing that we can say. I know if I correct in this thought, but I don't know. And it's
No, we're
No.
losing Patricio.
Yeah, we lost you, Patricio.
Oh, you're back, I think.
You're back.
No.
This is building the hype. We don't know what it's
Yeah.
going to look like. We don't know.
I have a follow-up question that's probably one for Patricio, but maybe you can answer, Marianne. This Castor 2, are you thinking of it as like is it going to be embedded in the existing Castor font as a different style, or is it a whole other typeface?
I think Patricio's back.
Patricio, are you back? We lost you for a bit.
Yeah, we lost you for a bit, but okay.
no, in which part? I don't know.
I think it was towards the end, so we got most of your answer.
I think you can. Well, on my end, I'll say just briefly. I think that has to be different, not embedded into our existing Castor. Maybe it might have a different name. I don't know, but I think it has to be a separate system. But actually, that's something that we don't know, and I know what Patricio thinks about it.
I don't know. I think that this is a Marianne project, so I only add tool to this for being alive with typeface. I don't know. I have my thought of this. It could be interesting compare these two shapes, but I think that the answer for this will be do it and think about this.
Okay.
Can
We
I,
have- Go ahead, Yuchen.
yeah, sorry, I was very excited when trees were mentioned, how like writing as a technology, as Patricio you mentioned, has so much to do with the surrounding resource. And it reminded me of one theory of why Mandarin Chinese has so many vertical, horizontal lines. It's because that the original writing surface was bamboo. And the fiber of bamboo is so hard that you actually have to go either with it or across it. But the reason why Sumatra script has so many little circles was because that it was written on mulberry leaves initially. And mulberry leaves is so tender, you have to, draw circles to distribute the pressure so you don't break the leaves. So maybe in essence, even though we're both working with animals, but eventually we're also working with plants. Actually, in the end, it's the plants that determines the shape of our scripts.
Yeah. So in that sense, actually, to bring that, maybe I have been to a self-criticism on me. I have not been talking about trees, which is the body that has been altered and the surface, and more than the surface is another body that is changing the action. And as you said, it also depending on maybe in this case of the beaver, depending on the how hard, how soft the wood is, it alters the writing system, the teeth mark kind of shape, iterations or inflections. So I think, yeah, actually it's true, probably that has been omitted, but yeah, so the material shapes the ways of the form of writing. So I think that's also how writing becomes so flexible throughout time.
And maybe, I mean, you keep the mentioning of marks makes me involuntarily think of marks. And of course, there's a materialist bent to what we're talking about. I'm using paper and pencil that kind of determines the characters that I create. While your Patricio is more fluent with technologies and that kind of sculptures, how a paragraph could look for you, unlike how it could look to me.
Yuchen, there is a question for you in the Q&A. Which places does the choral language live? I mean, how is the system used or practiced?
Yes, I'm happy to show you. It lives here behind me. Although this is a temporary home, because I've been doing a lot of residencies as a strategy because I can't afford to rent one studio. So there's a lot of packing and unpacking and moving. But for this year, I'm here in Macmillan, and chorals live here. Although this is actually a shrinking display, because as I translate, whenever I translate a sentence, I will pack them into these little envelopes. Since a lot of words need to be reused, especially prepositions or pronouns, or for example, the word for the sea actually shows up in many different sentences because the sea is just overwhelmingly present. So this envelope shelving system helps me to find my words. And this is the chorals that I'm currently working with. They live on my table. And I started making this dictionary about the second years into the project because I realized I began to forget words, but also I needed a context. For example, with the word river, I would want to see what I did with the sea. Initially, I made an accordion because it's still ongoing. So with accordion, I can always add to the back of it. However, it's too hard to find a page with accordion. It's not really practical. So I made where is it? There, a paperback instead. And as I was mentioning earlier, I started to forge chorals a year ago because of exhibition, but also it was illegal to transport these animal corpses. The island I stayed on, the owner of it was a private island, and the owner was quite powerful. He had someone from a university in Malaysia wrote a letter saying I'm a marine researcher, helped me to smuggle this batch of words to me to New York where I live. So yeah, that's where they are now.
Thank you. I know we're way over time, but I'm dying to ask you this question. It's about how the corals are 3D objects. You've done these phenomenal, intricate drawings of them. Are they site specific, or can each word be written in any single side of each coral?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Actually, I was about to mention that about Castor. I recognize how very often it's the placing of a shape that makes the meaning change, which I also use, for example, with my pronoun. If I place it differently in relation to the reader, it means different interlocutors, like in different relationships. My choice of in terms of dimension is rather static. I would usually place it the way it feels natural to me. I imagine it will be the way it grows in relation to gravity and ocean tide. But occasionally I do move them, and that movement would be semiotic, so to speak, will mean something. I can show you one example here. Here. So this is the only occasion where I use 4 chorals to signify one word, and this word is the West, because I think the West doesn't exist. Like there's no point on earth that's the West. The West must exist in relationship to other orientations. Or this is for a friend of mine who's releasing a record, and the concept of the record is independency. But I don't have the word independency yet, but I have dependency and negation. So I the front and back of the record to say dependency without. So these are the baby steps of trying to play with their combinations and orientations.
Very cool. Okay, I think we need to wrap it up because we're
Sadly.
so very sadly because we're way over. I do want to mention though, well, we're incredibly proud to have had you be part of our speaker series and to have had Castor project in Quasi, and also the audience may not know this yet, but we are working on a pop-up book exhibition that relates to Quasi at Art Center on campus. It's an exhibition exclusively of books curated by Alex Baljou from Designing Writing and the Art Center Library. And Yuchen's book is part of that collection. So we love that we've had your work on display here. And next week, Alex Baljou will be here, and we have, let me put the links in the chat. We have an evening at the Quasi Library. That's what we're calling our pop-up book exhibition, where we will be, there's going to be a show and tell with Alex Baljou and Rachel Julius and Bob Derrick from the Art Center Library. And attendees will be able to touch the books and go through them, and they're all beautiful and rare. So that's the first part of the evening at 6:30, and then that will be followed by a talk by Alex Baljou about curating and collecting and editing published material. And then next week, also on Thursday, we have, I dropped that in the chat as well. We have a exhibition tour of Quasi. It's the first one we've done since we're doing since it opened in November. Ximena and I will be taking people through the project, and Alex will be joining us sort of as a injecting thoughts in the discussion and creating a discussion around the theme of the exhibition.
Yeah. For the people that are here in Pasadena, because I think most people are international, but hopefully you can make it. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's super interesting to hear about what you've done with language and how you played with it. I think your points of view are like essential to the Quasi show. So I'm very glad we're closing with this.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
Me too. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for attending.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.